Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Today's webcast is Sage HRMS HR Actions Online Forms and Plugins, Streamlining Your Onboarding Process. My name is Jessica Morency. I'm one of the Field Sales Engineers with Sage. So I'm going to get the meeting kicked off for us today, but we have here to present the topic today, Joe Rotella from Delphia Consulting. They are the creators of the HR Actions product, as well as all of the forms and plugins that go along with it. So just to take a minute for some housekeeping items. The lines are muted, and they will be for the duration of the webcast to cut down on some of the background noise. We are recording this session, and for Q&A, if you have questions as we go throughout the presentation, you can put them into the chat. We will be monitoring that as we go through, and we should have some time towards the end for some Q&A. We can either unmute our lines and discuss any questions that you have or answer questions that have come in through the chat. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Joe. And Joe, it's all yours.
Thank you, Jessica, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me. I'm Joe Rotella here at Delphia Consulting. As Jessica mentioned, we're the publishers of HR Actions and its plugins. It is a Sage-endorsed solution, so that's like the equivalent of having the Sage Good Housekeeping seal of approval. It means we work very closely together on the timing of releases, feature sets, architecture, and to make sure that when you upgrade Sage HRMS, that HR Actions is going to work as well with that upgrade. So that's one of the benefits of being an endorsed solution. What I'd like to talk with you about this afternoon is a little bit about onboarding in general. We'll talk about the way it's been in the past and the way you can handle it now. And then we're going to look at an entire new hire experience, from filling out an online application to their first day at work. We'll talk about how it works, the benefits, and give a little demonstration of each piece along the way. And then we'll talk a little bit about behind the scenes, what makes all this happen, including HR Actions, which is a utility, an add-on to Sage HRMS that allows you to produce web-based forms using any of the fields in Sage HRMS, including custom details, excluding benefits. So it basically allows you to take all the information you have in Sage HRMS, make it available in online forms with workflow, routing when they're all done, and when HR says it's good to go, one-click update Sage HRMS. So let's get started with our little discussion about onboarding. Now, traditionally, onboarding is a very intensive process from a paper perspective. People are filling out forms. Forms are getting routed around to different folks throughout, say, the interview process. Then once somebody agrees and, hey, this is the person we're going to hire, then you've got a ton of forms as part of that onboarding experience. So it's very, very paper intensive. Lots of manual data entry. Folks fill out traditional paper applications, and then eventually that paper application, if you choose to hire them, has to be entered into Sage HRMS. A lot of times I see HR folks with checklists because there's so much to manage in the process. You end up building a list where you can go through and say, well, make sure we've done this and this and this and that, and then notify so-and-so that this has happened. That checklist is typically on paper. Maybe it's on a shared drive somewhere, but it can be difficult to update. It's sometimes difficult for everyone in the organization to have visibility into that checklist. And it can also lead to a very bad first experience for the new hire on their first day. It can be filled with a lot of first day administrivia. So someone's all excited to begin their new employment with your organization, and the first thing they do is they're greeted by HR, who gives them a stack of papers to fill out. They sit and fill all those out. Some of the enthusiasm tends to vanish. It can really have a negative impact on the employment brand. If you go out on YouTube, as an example, I did some searching, and I was trying to find some examples of onboarding videos. And the ones I found from an employee perspective typically were videos showing people how to fill out all these forms, so that wasn't very exciting. And the ones that I found that were from employees or applicants were folks typically talking about, hey, this is my first day at work, and so far it hasn't been very good. I've spent my day in a cube filling out forms. And that stuff tends to spread very, very quickly. So when we look at traditional onboarding, lots of paper, lots of manual data entry, hard to manage, and of course, that may not necessarily produce the best first day experience. Luckily, we can change all that now with Sage HRMS. We can really transform the onboarding process. First of all, we can take it paperless. And I think that that's actually the expectation now. When you look at how many folks are walking around with smartphones, I think the latest study I saw from ABC News said that 60% of all folks living in America had a smartphone right now. I think folks expect to do things not only paperless, but even do it on their mobile device. We also can have data flow between different modules, say your applicant tracking system or cyber, right into Sage HRMS without having to rekey anything in. And we can start to leverage reports and even an add-on module like alerts to really manage the whole process. This all can be done even before day one. So now you can actually go through the recruiting process, hire someone, give them a start date that's in the future, say 2 weeks from now, and then from their home, either their desktop, a laptop, a mobile device, cell phone or tablet, let them actually begin the onboarding process, maybe complete a bunch of that paperwork. So when they get to their new job on day one, they can actually start doing the job itself and keep some of that enthusiasm. Let's talk about how that's possible. This is a little bit about the process, and I've boiled it down here to these 5 steps. We're going to go through each step in detail. I'll show you the software that makes that step happen. At the end, we'll talk about some of the behind the scenes. But in general, a person hits the web and they fill out an online application. For some organizations, especially those, say, with high turnover, as an example, the quick food service industry, that application might actually be quite short. For other industries, it might be a little bit more lengthy. Somebody fills out that application online, and of course the applicant tracking system is going to help manage that whole process of how many people have applied, who do we want to see for an interview, what are folks' comments on that interview, and so on. We're not going to really focus on that part today. We'll just look at filling out an online application. And then assume all that's been done, and then the next thing is you say, yes, this is the applicant I want to hire, and you mark that applicant as ready to hire. Well, then we're going to go and jump over into HR Actions, the web-based forms solution for Sage HRMS. And HR Actions has a NewHire Form. And what this allows someone to do is bring up that NewHire Form, be presented with a list of folks who are marked as ready to hire from the applicant tracking system, bring the information over from the applicant tracking system right into that NewHire Form, so no typing there. They can complete it, hit initiate, and route it for approval. Once they're all approved and the person is then in Sage HRMS, it means employee self-service, ESS, is available to them. They can go ahead and create their own login into ESS and then jump right into ESS to their action items and be presented with a list of forms that you decide are appropriate for them as part of the new hire process. That could be the I-9, W-4, handbook acknowledgments, and so on. All that's done, they're ready for day one, first day on the job. And so a lot of this can be accomplished before they even hit your office on day one. If you feel it's commensurable, you might want to give them a sign-on bonus if they have all their paperwork done before they get there on day one. Otherwise, at least they can do it online when they're in your office. So let's dive into the details just a little bit. We'll start with the applicant completing that new hire application. So this is done online through your applicant tracking system. In this case, we're using Cyber Recruiter. It presents them with an online application. And of course, as part of the applicant tracking system, it's going to track the applicant throughout the recruiting process. It is, of course, paperless. This is going to give you a positive impact on your employment brand, and it really shifts some of that data entry from HR, who would typically then take a paper application and have to go type it all in somewhere. It's shifting it over to the applicant themselves. Of course, because it's paperless, it means that you can really expedite the whole recruiting process. Someone can fill out an application and boom, the instant it's complete, the appropriate folks can be notified. Maybe there's even some automatic screening going on in there. Communication among folks who are looking at that recruit is all going to happen a lot quicker when it's all electronic. And of course, we're going to eliminate paper. So let's jump over and just take a quick look at what that might look like. So I'm sharing my desktop here, and if I bring up a browser, I'm using Chrome in this case. I've brought up the careers page on our simulated website. And so here someone can go in and let's say they're looking for a particular job, a particular type of job. I'll just say all. Maybe they only want a particular location. They only want full-time or part-time. Of course, they can do all that kinds of searching, get presented with a list of jobs, decide on the job they're interested in, see that full description, refer it to a friend, and of course we know the power of, in this case, sharing, how that can help spread the word about a particular job. Or they can say, hey, I want to apply. So they click the Apply Now button, and it's going to give them the online application. They do have the option here to attach a resume if they'd like. We're just going to go ahead and look at the normal application here. And of course, it's a series of pages in this case. That's what the next button is in the upper right. But the person can go ahead and fill out their name and street information, cell phone contact information, and so on. I'm not going to do all that in today's demonstration. We're going to assume that I filled all this out. My name is Samuel Cullen in this case. I filled it all out. It made it through any gatekeepers. I've had interviews. Everyone just loved me as a candidate, and now they are ready to hire me. So they went into the Applicant Tracking System administrative interface and marked it as ready to hire. So let's talk about what happens then when you get to that ready to hire experience. That's step 2 in our process. The recruiting or hiring manager then completes a NewHire form. So what's really going to happen here behind the scenes is that the applicant, in my case Sam Cullen, was flagged as ready to hire. That means his name is going to be presented in a list to people who have the permissions to fill out a NewHire form. We're going to fill out the form with Sam's information. All of Sam's data from the applicant tracking system is going to come over into the NewHire form. And then when the NewHire form is saved to Sage HRMS, the applicant status back over in the applicant tracking system will be changed to reflect that they've been hired. So think of this little step here really as the glue. It's taking information from the applicant tracking system, bringing it over to a form that's created using HR Actions, the add-on to Sage HRMS. That form can be filled out, routed for approval, and at the end, when we update Sage HRMS, it's actually going to put that person's information into Sage HRMS as a new hire. Let's take a look at what that's going to look like. So if we go back over here to my desktop, we're going to assume I filled all this out as Sam Cullen, went, like I said, through the interview process, and eventually in the applicant tracking system was marked as ready to hire. So now I'm going to log in as the hiring manager. In this case, I'm going to be Anna Gordon. We're going to go into Sage Employee Self-Service. So Sage ESS, if you're unfamiliar with that, is another module available for Sage HRMS. It really provides employees with an employee portal so that they can actually go in and see information, in this case bring up forms, fill out forms, and so on. They can enter information as well. So we're going to log in here as Ann Gordon. And you'll see the ESS interface. Now, if you're new to ESS, this would be something great to talk to your business partner about. You can see all the flexibility that ESS gives you when you're trying to present employees with information. It's really a framework into which a lot of the Sage endorsed modules can be plugged into. So you can plug in things like seeing your time off, your compensation, maybe your pay history, even pick up your pay stubs, and so on. But I'm going to jump over here to HR Actions. And again, this is the add-on that allows you to build web-based forms for Sage HRMS. We have a couple different actions. We have actions that we complete from yourself. That might be change your address or maybe do a FEMLA request. And underneath that, we have actions that you can complete as a manager. So a NewHire form is a manager form. I'm going to go ahead and bring that up. Say that I'm looking specifically for a NewHire form. And now I get to pick the form itself. We'll do the hire or rehire form. Hit submit, and the form comes up. Again, this form was built with HR Actions, and we're able to choose the fields that we want from Sage HRMS and decide what fields those are that are displayed on this form or any of the forms we build with HR Actions. The key concept here is this particular drop-down menu that says Applicant. And you'll notice we have a list of applicants in there, and right next to it, the abbreviation for the job that they applied for. So this is pulled this list of applicants from the applicants over in the Applicant Tracking System, Cyber, that were marked as ready to hire. And so remember, in my scenario, I was Sam Cullen, and Sam went in, filled out the application, and so on, all the way down to we said, yep, that's who we want to hire. So we marked him as ready to hire. Now we can just pick his name here. And what's happening now is HR Actions is going to the Applicant Tracking System and pulling in all the information that was on Sam's application. With all that populated, it's really just up to us to either make any changes or fill in the blank. So this is a new hire, and we've got his name, SSN, all that seems okay. I'm going to skip down here a little bit. It looks like he's already got me as his supervisor. I could change that, but since I'm filling out the form, I'm the default there. Pay frequency, let's make him hourly, and let's say at $11 an hour. As soon as I leave that field, it'll calculate all the other fields. And here I can go ahead and say that his employment status is now active. You'll notice down at the bottom a little electronic routing slip. And in this case, it has 3 names on it: Veronica Bell, someone in HR, and then Shirley Douglas, an executive. So when you build forms with HR Actions, you define the routing slip at the bottom of the form. It can have any combination of managers that walk the chain of command for an individual. It can have a hierarchy of HR folks, a hierarchy of executives, and it can also have named approvers. So you might name someone as an I-9 auditor or someone in payroll as an example. You can also write business rules that will extend this routing based on information right on the form. So as an example, if we needed a special sign-off, if somebody's salary was over a certain amount, we could write a rule in HR Actions that says if the salary is over this amount, then be sure there are, I don't know, two executives on the routing slip. If that were the case, HR Actions would automatically extend this routing to put those extra folks on. But in this case, I'm good to go. I've got it all filled out. I'm just going to hit Initiate. Now, when I hit Initiate, I'm basically submitting this form for approval, and it's going to go through this routing slip down at the bottom. HR Actions routes forms serially, in other words, one by one, going down this routing slip. So we're going to take the first person, Veronica Bell, send her an email that says you have something to approve. She can then review it, approve or reject it. If she approves it, it'll go on to the next person, and we'll email that person and so on. So right now we have a serial routing process, one by one, right down that routing slip. So let me go ahead and say Initiate. I'll get a little confirmation window. It gives me an ID number, and it says I've just submitted a hire form for Sam Cullen. So I'll log off here. Now, if we were to log into email as Veronica Bell, we would see email that says you have a new hire form to approve, and here's a link. She could click that link. If she wasn't already signed in, she could sign in, just like I am now. And it would take her right to her HR Actions dashboard, where you can see she has one action waiting for review. So Veronica can pull that up, and sure enough, there it is, our new hire form for Sam Cullen. And we can even see a little short version of the routing slip. O stands for operations. That's walking that manager chain. So I'm the first one there. That's what the hourglass is showing. That's me, Veronica Bell. After Veronica, we know it's going to go to Joe in HR, and then we know it's going to go to Shirley, an executive. So Veronica can review this. She can look at everything on the form. In this case, she even has permission to change information on the form, and you can turn that on and off on a per form basis. But if she's happy with this, she can say, looks great, eager to get Sam on board, and hit approve, and it'll then go to the next person, Joe Black. She could also reject it. It would let the originator, in this case Anna Gordon, know it was rejected, or she could leave a comment and send it back to Anna, return it to the initiator. Later on in the routing, people can approve it, it'll go forward, they can reject it, or they can send it back to someone earlier in the process. So we're just going to let her approve it, and it'll move on to the next person on that routing slip. Now, I don't think you want to see me go through and approve this guy 3 times. So let's jump in here and look at this from an administrative standpoint. I'm going to log in here again as Veronica Bell. She happens to be the head of HR. I'm logging into a different application now. So we've actually on our 3rd different website because we've been wearing multiple hats. So the applicant went to our public website to fill out an online application. Then the hiring manager went to employee self-service to fill out a NewHire form. And now I'm going to HR Actions admin interface just so I can see what this process is like from an administrative standpoint. So Veronica here has a lot of options to maintain the HR Actions application, the application that builds these web-based forms. As an example, she can do everything from change the colors of the forms to write the business rules we talked about. Maybe a salary is so high we need extra approvers. She can look at all the forms that are available in the system. There's no limit to how many forms you create with HR Actions. She can set up delegates if someone's going away on vacation. But most importantly, she has this dashboard. And it's now showing her all the forms that are actively routing. In other words, they're in workflow. They're in that approval process. And that's the cool part of HR Actions is that for many organizations, this gives an HR team visibility into work that's coming down the pipeline. Some organizations, HR doesn't really know something's happened until that finished form hits their in-basket. So here I can look ahead and say, oh, look, we've got a NewHire form out there for Sam Cullen, and it looks like Shania Twain had an OSHA incident, and that's in the works. And we can see exactly where it is in the routing process. So if this was a very important hire, we'll pretend that in our scenario today, and maybe the CEO called and said, what's going on with hiring Sam Cullen? We need him to start, get this approved. I can say, well, the form has been submitted. It was approved by me. It's now waiting on Joe in HR, and after that, Shirley. And if the CEO says, oh, forget those approvals, it has CEO approval, and I just want it to happen today, well, that's easy to do too. That's where these operations come into play. We can stop a form dead in its tracks. We can skip one approver at a time and work our way through that routing slip, or we can just skip everyone. So I'm going to go ahead and skip everyone. Give it a reason. CEO called and said to approve this. Hit approve, and now that NewHire form is no longer active. It's no longer routing. We're done routing. It's sitting in pending, and you can think of pending as HR's inbox. This is where all the paper forms you used to have would go. When they were all done routing, they were all approved, and they were ready for HR to deal with them. And typically that meant enter that data into Sage HRMS and then go file that piece of paper. So there's our very first form. It's pending. It's ready to update Sage HRMS. But before I do that, let's go look at Sage HRMS for a minute. I got it running over here, and do a view. Looks like I was timed out, so let me log back in here. And just so it doesn't look like there's any magic going on behind the scenes, I'm going to go inside of Sage HRMS, and let's look for Sam Cullen and make sure that he's not in there. There's a William Cullen, but no Sam. So that works fine for me. Now let's go over here to our form. This is our NewHire form. It's all been approved. One mouse click here will update Sage HRMS. I hit OK. One more mouse click will confirm that I want to add the NewHire, and I'm done. So let's go over here now, back to Sage HRMS. Let's search for Cullen. And sure enough, we have 2. There's Sam Cullen, the purchasing manager that we just hired. So we've actually taken that applicant, filled out a NewHire form, and then automatically updated Sage HRMS with that single mouse click. Of course, that NewHire form becomes part of Sam's online personnel file. So if I go over here to our electronic file cabinet, I could search as an example and say, I'd like to see all the forms that are available for Cullen, in this case Sam, person we just hired, hit search, And sure enough, there's the NewHire form, the first piece of paper, in double quotes, in the online personnel file. So this NewHire process is a great way to start somebody's online file. It's the very first piece of documentation in there. So let's log out here. Now we're going to imagine that we called Sam and said, hey, you're all set up. We're looking forward to you starting. Maybe it's going to happen in 2 weeks, August 1st. So we're looking forward to you starting the beginning of August. If you could, between now and then, we'd like you to visit our self-service portal, employee self-service, and register as a first-time user. So let's go ahead and just talk about that for just a second. We've done step 2 here. As you could see, we brought that information over from the applicant tracking system on the NewHire form, completed it, routed it for approval, and then updated Sage HRMS. There was no manual data in the process. This also facilitates rehires because the form is smart enough to detect a rehire versus a hire and do the right thing. You can have that optional routing at the bottom if you want to have a workflow process. You can automatically assign employee numbers, and then as I showed you, that really becomes the first document in the NewHire, in that employee's online personnel file. Step 3 now, they're in Sage HRMS. The candidate, in this case now the employee, just has to create their own employee self-service login. And they can do that right over the web, even if their start date is in the future. Once they're in Sage HRMS, they can still create their ESS login. And by letting them do it themselves through self-service, you really lower that administrative burden. So I'm going to go over here and let's see how easy it is to create that login. Sam just had to go over here to ESS, click that I was a first-time user, and fill in his name, Samuel Cullen, and choose a security question. Now a username and a password. And Sam is all set up. So he's in ESS and ready to roll. So what happens next in our scenario is that Sam can now begin the whole onboarding process. So here, the employee is presented with a list of forms, and that's using the Dynamic Forms checklist. It's a little add-in or plug-in to Sage HRMS HR Actions. What that allows HR folks to do is build a list of forms, give them a name, and then present them to the user. And in fact, the forms themselves, you can have a criteria to say this is when this form should show up. You can even have criteria for when the whole list should show up. So the whole key here is to give the right forms at the right time to the right person. And in an onboarding example, we're typically thinking about things like I-9s, W-4s, any policy acknowledgments, or even a direct deposit slip. We have an online direct deposit form if you're using Sage HRMS SQL Payroll. So let's take a look at what that process looks like. Again, I'm logged in over here as Sam Cullen, our new hire, in the Employee Self-Service portal. And you'll see I have an item here in the left-hand side menu that says My Action Items. So when I click it, I'm actually getting a list of forms that I need to complete, in this case, as part of my onboarding process. But you could create these lists for different reasons. For example, you might make a list based on someone's anniversary date. The list comes up, it might have their performance review form, maybe a goal setting form for the next cycle. It might also have all your acknowledgments again, because remember, SHRM says that as a best practice, you shouldn't just give employees this acknowledgement, policy acknowledgement information stuff when you hire them, but you should repeat it every year, and that's the best way to minimize your risk of exposure for folks who violate those policies. So let's look at some sample forms here, and again, all these forms are built with HR Actions. The first one is a data confirmation form. So again, remember, as part of the recruiting process, we captured a bunch of information using the applicant tracking system. We fed that right into the NewHire form, fed it right into Sage HRMS. But we might want to give the new hire the chance to look at that information, fix anything that's changed, or even add additional information, perhaps their past education, previous employment, and so on. So let's see if we can't get that new hire form up. And my server seems to be stuck. log off and log back in. Maybe I timed out. Well, looks like my server's having a little bit of trouble here. Let me try a different employee, see if I can do it through a different employee login. How about so I think my server's had a little bit of a hiccup here, so I'm going to jump out and jump over to a different server. Let me get back out here to the screen. You know, that's always the case. You go to give a demo, and that's when your server decides to have the hiccups. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a different server just to walk through and see what some of those forms are like. I'm connecting up to that server now. And we won't go ahead and rehire Sam Cullen. I'll just use a different employee in that environment. So for any of you who have ever had to give a presentation, now you know what that, I can't think of that rule they always say that happens. When something's going to go wrong, it has to give it right when you're in the middle of a presentation. So let's go ahead.
Murphy's Law.
Murphy's Law, that's it. See, I couldn't even think of that. That didn't even cross my mind. Okay, so I've jumped over to a different server.
While you're logging in, Joe, we did have a question that came through and wanted to know, can we use these forms on a smartphone?
Really good question, really good question. The short answer is yes. And what you want to think about here, let me go ahead and log in as I'm talking, is that these forms and in ESS, everything you see here is actually available through the web, through any web browser. So as long as you have a device that has a web browser and has access to the site, then you can use the forms. It's not an app, so it's not something you have to download and install on your phone. You can just get to it through that web browser. So let's see now if this demo environment is going to work. Let me refresh all that data in the database. Maybe that'll do the trick. When you deploy employee self-service and ESS, you actually have two ways of deploying it. You can deploy it so that it's only available on your intranet, and that means folks could only get to it within your firewall, within work. Or you could deploy it on the public web, the internet, and then folks could get to it, you know, from home, from the library, when they're on vacation, through their smartphone, their mobile device. And of course, when you deploy it over the internet, you're going to be able to do that safely and securely the same way you would a banking or shopping application. I always think that in today's world, deploying it over the internet really makes the most sense, because if you're like me, you know, it's when I'm at home that I say, oh boy, I wish I could look at my pay stub, or oh, I need to fill out this form for work. I can do it at home, I can do it while I'm on the road. So I'm a big fan of deploying it over the internet. Let's go ahead and look at the checklist again. And boy, I'm just having a terrible time here all of a sudden getting this thing to go.
Joe, I've got
there
mine.
We go.
Oh, there you go.
There we go. See, that's because you just said that, Jessica. Because you said you had your demo environment working, it worked.
Yeah, I scared it.
You might have to say it again. I have a wand here in my desk. I might have to pull out my wand. There you go. So here's our data confirmation form. Again, in our scenario, we captured a lot of information from our applicant as part of the applicant tracking system, or the applicant Tracking System's whole process. We brought that over on a NewHire form. We hired them. We put them right in Sage HRMS. Now they're using self-service to go through this onboarding process. And the first form you give them could be this data confirmation form. You'll notice it has 3 columns, a label on the left, the value that's in Sage HRMS right now in the middle, and a blank over on the right. So here they can basically zoom down that middle column and look at what's in there, and if they need to make any updates, this is the time to do it over here on the right-hand side. They can also fill in the blanks. So maybe we want to get that additional information about their emergency contacts or their previous employment, previous education. And of course, when they're all done, they can fill all this out and hit initiate. It'll start the routing process. If they want to do some now and come back to it later, they can hit save and continue. Save it and keep right on working, or save and I'll come back to it in a bit. If I just hit save, you'll notice here that in my to-do list, it's marked as draft. So it's easy for me to see what I've started versus what I need to create. Let's look at the I-9 form as well. So with an extra plug-in on top of HR Actions, you can go paperless with your I-9s. All of our forms you'll see have a similar layout. There's a logo in the upper left that says Sage HRMS HR Actions. We can change that, of course, and even the colors of everything you see here we could change to match your employment brand. There's a title of the form at the top, print button over on the right, instructions. This stripe we call the form header. It has things like the employee's name, who submitted the form, their division, location, department, and so on. That consistently appears on every form that's created with HR Actions. There's a place for dates, and then any form can have up to 5 attachments. And we're taking advantage of that here on the I-9 by giving folks a place to attach the documents from lists A, B, and C. So maybe you want to scan those documents and attach them right to the I-9. Here's your standard I-9 information. The top half is filled out by the employee, and then they go ahead and do their certification. They typically stop there. This next part can be filled out by the preparer or translator. And then, of course, there's the employer section where they go ahead and review and verify all the documents from lists A, B, and C. We have a copy of what looks like the real I-9 down here at the bottom of the form. All the information that you put in at the top in those fields, those boxes, actually displays down below in this form. And that, while not really necessary, it actually gives folks a really good comfort feeling because they recognize the look of this form. And then, of course, down at the bottom, you have a place to do re-verifications. If you're entering this information into something like E-Verify, this is where you're going to take the response from E-Verify and update the form. And we have a routing slip down here. In this case, it's going to a manager and then our legal I-9 auditor. Now, the cool thing here is behind the scenes, if you're using another Sage-endorsed module called Alerts, I like to think of alerts as Yoo-hoo. That's what I usually tell my clients to call it. Yoo-hoo or Alerts is great at staring at the database, and when it sees whatever conditions you define, it can then do something, most commonly send email. So we know that the I-9 really needs to be done within 3 days of their start date. So in this case, you could have Alerts staring at the database, keeping an eye on the status of this form as well as their start date. And let's say that it's not done on day 1. Maybe Alerts would send email to the person and say, you know, hello, we need you to do your I-9 tomorrow, today, right now, if they can get to it from home. But if it's not done, say, by the end of day 2, then you might want Alerts to send an email both to that person, their manager, and maybe even someone in HR to give them the heads up, hey, you know, we need to have this done now within 1 day or we face penalties. So there's an I-9. I'll go ahead and get out of there. I'm going to just save these as drafts so we can see the status updating there to draft. W-4s, I'll look at a federal one. What's cool is we do have W-4s for the federal level and all the states. Again, what you fill out here at the top, for example, I'll put single and an additional $6.52 withholding. I'm going to hit save and continue just so you can see how that information goes down to the bottom of the form and actually fills in the W-4. If you're an organization that has employees in multiple states, when you build your onboarding list of forms, you'd probably want to put the W-4s in the list for all the states so that you just had one list. But think about it from an employee or a new hire perspective. It would be ridiculous to show them all the W-4s that you need to support and have them pick their state. In this case, you probably would run a condition that says all the W-4s are in the list, but we only want to show you the W-4 for that employee's state. And you can do that as well. So let's look at a couple more, and then I'll jump back. And I'm told that my other server is up and running. It had a hiccup. Here's an example of an acknowledgement form. This is a handbook acknowledgement. Same format, icon in the upper left, title and print button, the form header and comments. Here, of course, a handbook's way too big to embed right in your form. So we just made a link to a version of the handbook that's available, say, on the web. And then we've got a field coming right out of Sage HRMS, the date handbook read. The cool part about this form, though, is this employee signature block. Now, there's lots of different ways to configure this block, and you'd want to choose the way that's right for you. I've turned on pretty much every option here, so you'd never see it quite look like this in the real world. This is really the same way as you signing, say, your tax return if you do electronic filing through TurboTax or through the IRS website. It's been many years now, I think over 10 years, that the government's allowed electronic signature. And the requirements, well, you can decide. Do you want the employee to type their name? In this case, they'd have to type their name exactly as it appears in the HRMS. And if they're not sure how their name appears, they can look at it right at the top of the form. You can make the middle initial mandatory or optional. You might want them to check a box that says they agree or not, or choose that from a drop-down list, I agree or I don't agree. And then perhaps type in the last 4 digits of their Social Security number to help verify their identity. Now, you'll notice on the line below, I display the whole Social Security number. I do that just so that when I demo, I know what numbers I need to type in, because when you jump around to a whole bunch of different employees, that gets a little confusing. So you'd never put that on the real form. And then, of course, they can put the date that they signed it. And what makes all this tick is the instructions down in the bottom. By electronically signing above and clicking on Initiate Action below, I acknowledge that I have received a copy of the employee handbook. So this employee signature block, electronic signature, can be used pretty much on any form. And in this case, we're using it there on that handbook acknowledgement. Now, since I'm told that our other server is up and running again, I'm going to jump out here and go back in and log into that server. So we're talking about filling out these forms in our paperless environment. The benefits, of course, by giving people that exact list and saying, here are the forms that you need to fill out, there's no confusion there. They don't have to go pick them out of a list. They don't have to go figure out what ones they need to fill out or not fill out. It also increases the probability that forms are going to be completed in a timely manner, because right in self-service, you've given them an item that says, My Forms. And of course, managers have visibility into the status of these forms, so they can see exactly what the status is. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. I'm going to go back over here and share. Now, in the spirit of full disclosure, I did jump back to my first server. They got that working. So you'll see here I've got my list. You'll see some other things in the list. For example, the tax form for Delaware, or an 8850 form for reporting new hires. There's the direct deposit form, a confidentiality agreement. So there were a few more in this list in my newest server compared to my old server. Remember, this is Sam Cullen. His supervisor was Veronica Bell. So we're going to be able to log in as Veronica, or no, his supervisor was Anna Gordon. See how tricky it is when you jump around between all these folks. So if Anna logs into self-service, Anna's going to have the ability as well to see exactly what's going on with her direct reports form. So if she goes over here to Dynamic Forms Management, Anna can see she has 2 direct reports, Sam Cullen and Speedy Gonzalez, who are in the middle of the onboarding process. She actually has a couple folks, both of them, who are in the middle of their performance review process as well, and their goal-setting process. So in this demo environment, boy, Speedy and Sam they've got a lot of forms on their to-do list. But here we can see in a quick snapshot all the forms that we've asked Sam to complete. That's that middle column there that says form. And real clearly, right next to it, the status. It looks like 3 of them are in progress, and we can even see the date on when those were started. And of course, 4 of them haven't even been started at all. So the manager, Anna, could go talk to Sam and say, hey, get going. Of course, Sam is going faster than Speedy at this point. Speedy hasn't even started anything. But that's the advantage here of these form checklists, is it makes it really easy for someone to see exactly what they need to fill out, and it makes it real easy for the manager to have that kind of visibility to see what's left to fill out. I'm going to log off and go back here to Sam. Just because I briefly want to show you that list again. We've seen some W-4s. Let's look at the confidentiality agreement. I think this is a short one. So we put the text of the agreement right on the form itself. Remember, for the handbook, we linked out to the handbook website. Here we put the text of the agreement right on the form, and then we're using our employee signature block again as well. I'll just delete this one for now. And let's take a quick peek too there at the direct deposit form. I can't tell you why, I don't have a great reason, but I love our direct deposit form because I like how it actually shows a picture of the check for folks to really understand this is where the routing number comes from, this is where the account number comes from. And believe it or not, in my experience, I still have folks who don't know which part of the check is the routing number and which is the account number. And of course, they can add their payroll information here. They can give it a name. They can choose the routing number, the bank information, and so on, hit submit. And you can have multiple of these as well if they want to split that deposit into multiple banks. So there's an example of that. And of course, all the actions that anyone's ever done is available in their online file cabinet. So in this case, Sam is still new. He doesn't really have anything complete. He should have his NewHire form here, but remember, we went and did that over in a different server. So here we've talked about how the NewHire can complete all those paperless forms, all even before they start on day one, which means that day one is going to be a fantastic experience. Day one really becomes about them participating in the organization, feeling like they're coming right on board, not spending half a day doing paperwork. It's a better experience for them and a much more positive impact on your employment brand. And if you're curious about that, just set up some monitors in Twitter, do some looking on YouTube, and you'll see how many folks have posted about horrible first days at work, spending half a day doing paperwork. Worse yet, they didn't have an office ready, no cube was ready, their phone wasn't ready, their computer wasn't there. So remember, behind the scenes here, we can attach alerts to any of these forms, basically to any of the information in Sage HRMS, and we could be sending alerts along the way to tell IT, alert, someone's joining in 2 weeks, order their equipment, someone in facilities, we need a cube set up and ready to go, we need someone to provision their phone line, and so on, so that day one, they're really welcomed. You know, we're ready for you, you've got your forms done, we're good to go. So behind the scenes, what made all this tick? Of course, Sage HRMS is at the core of this. It's really the database that's holding all your HR information. The applicant tracking piece you saw, the online form, was provided by Sage HRMS Cyber Recruiter. And then all the forms after that, from NewHire to I-9, W-4, direct deposit, and any variety of any forms, was all provided by Sage HRMS HR Actions. If you're not familiar with HR Actions is the endorsed module that lets you build, use, and administer web-based forms for Sage HRMS. And we have whole webinars that focus just on HR Actions in general, and even one on HR Actions focused on the performance appraisal process, because it's a great tool for you to build an online performance appraisal form with questions, employee comments, manager comments, employee or manager ratings, so scoring, and do it all paperless. Building, you create all these forms without any programming. It's all done point and click with the mouse. You determine the routing and who can get to the form, can even build those conditional routing rules. Folks use the form over the web, just like you saw me do today, through a web browser. So again, that was an excellent question. Could you get to it from a mobile device? The answer is absolutely. They fill it out over the web, they initiate it, it then routes for approval, and then over on the administrator side, someone in HR can monitor the whole process, control the workflow, move forms ahead in the routing, move them all the way to completion, or cancel them. When you're happy with a form, one click updates Sage HRMS, and that's how we got Sam from a NewHire form right into Sage HRMS without any typing, without any rekeying of data. Since all this is in a database, it's easy to research and report on. You know, SHRM's big push now is big data. So imagine everyone's performance review inside a database. It would be easy to pull a particular question and compare men versus women, new hires versus experienced folks, one supervisory group compared to another, to maybe see if there's parts of your organization you could fine-tune a bit by looking at that data and really analyzing it from a strategic perspective. All the forms, of course, are available in that online personnel file. HR Actions lets you build forms with any of the fields in Sage HRMS, including custom details, and payroll just excludes benefits. We're not really intended for open enrollment. It really means you can build forms to support the entire employment lifecycle. Now, to learn more about this, I'd invite you to check out one of the HR Actions webinars provided through Sage. But in general, from a pre-employment and onboarding perspective, that's what we focused on today. We saw the NewHire Form, a couple different acknowledgments, W-4s, I-9, and direct deposit. But once someone's an employee, they may use HR Actions forms to change their address, put in a forwarding address, maybe do a FEMLA request. Managers are using these types of forms to do pay rate changes, transfer folks, put in a corrective action, terminate someone. And of course, goal setting and performance appraisal, it's really up to you who starts that process. In some organizations, the employee does, they do a self-review, then it goes to the manager, they do their part, you can lobby back and forth. Maybe just the manager does it, it's totally up to you. HR Action ships with about 40 or so samples right out of the box. You can use as is, you can edit them to make your own, or you can build your own from scratch. Again, no limit. We work with the Canadian government, and they have about 120 or so forms, maybe even 150 that they're using through HR Actions. Well, it's because they took about 40 or so basic forms. Performance appraisal, they may have a few flavors of it, some for security, some for admin staff. They took those 40 or so forms, translated them into English and Spanish, French. 40 times 3 right there would be 120. So you can see how that number can grow. But again, HR Actions is priced based on your number of employees, not the number of forms. So there's no reason to withhold doing stuff paperless when you can. Some of the plugins you saw today, the little add-ons on top of HR Actions, the NewHire Interface, that's what took the data right out of our online tracking system, our applicant tracking system, and put it on the NewHire Form. Then HR Actions routed that form, part of the standard HR Actions product, and made it the first form in the online personnel file. You saw the dynamic forms checklist. This is what displayed the list of forms in employee self-service. And remember, it was all about giving folks the right forms at the right time to the right person. And it's what allowed the manager to see the status of those lists so that they were really able to track what was going on within their organization. You saw federal and state W-4s with our electronic signature block. And of course, this is going to save not only all the paper but data entry. And you also saw the paperless I-9, and that was provided by one of our plugins as well. So with that, I'll open it up to questions, and Jessica can help me moderate those. I appreciate you spending time with me this afternoon, and I apologize for my little server glitch. And luckily, Jessica's magic words fixed it.
All right, thank you very much, Joe. So we do have a few questions. Is the Dynamic Forms Management an add-on? I think you've just answered that. That checklist is a plug-in to the standard HR Actions. Next question, is it formatted for Canadian forms, i.e. the TD1?
Although I didn't show them today, we do have the Canadian form equivalents, so you'd want to talk to your partner about that. But yes, we can support the Canadian forms as well.
Okay. Next question, what about a reminder of training that's due mostly during the onboarding process?
We'd want to talk about that a little bit more, because when you say reminder, there's probably a couple ways to go there. Again, if you're using the alerts, HR Actions is really going to be in charge of forms and the workflow for forms and email to tell folks they have a form to complete. In terms of training, if you're tracking the status of that training in Sage HRMS, maybe you have a field for it or you're using the training module, then something like alerts would be a great way to look at that information in the database and say, okay, if it's within so many days of their hire date and they still haven't completed their training because this field is blank, then send them a reminder. Now you can certainly use an HR Actions form to capture, hey, I completed the training, I read the book I was supposed to read, just like you would read the handbook, that kind of acknowledgement. But sending the reminder, hey, you should really get this done, would be a great use of alerts, maybe in combination with HR Actions to actually track whether or not they did the training.
Okay, and that's all we had that came through the chat. So we do still have about 5 minutes left on the clock. So if anybody has any questions, again, you can type them into the chat or you can unmute your line using *6 to ask any other questions that you may have. Okay, another question. How many pending action forms can the software handle on a concurrent basis?
No limit. We have no built-in limit to the number of forms you build, the number of forms that are routing, the number of forms that are complete and available on that online personnel file.
Okay. There's a cost or a question about the cost of the plugins.
The plugins are also priced based on your employee tier, so the number of employees in your organization. That's how HR Actions is priced. It's also how Employee Self-Service is priced. So you'd want to talk with your business partner or someone at Sage so that if you don't know it, they can look up your employee tier or license level, and they can give you the cost of the plugins based on that license level.
Another question, could we start in HR Actions with a NewHire form and not use the Cyber Recruiter?
Absolutely. You could fill out the NewHire form by hand, or there are other ways where you could have a very simple web-based application that's just an application. It's not the whole applicant tracking system. So we have a form available that just makes an online application available through your website. You could fill that out. They could fill that out if you wanted to and have it go right to the NewHire form. Or you could skip the whole recruit person fills out a form and you just fill out the NewHire form yourself.
Okay. How does it integrate with an already existing ATS or applicant tracking system?
So we do have an endorsed plugin right out of the box that integrates with Cyber, but we have made integration points as well to other applicant tracking systems. Some we have done, some we can easily build based on their architecture if they have an open architecture. So you'd want to talk to your partner about that or have them then contact us here at Delphia Consulting. So the other applicant tracking systems, the attachment to glue it together isn't endorsed by Sage yet. They've endorsed the Cyber one, but we do have other ones available as well.
Okay. All right, I don't see any others coming through. Nikki, do you see any others on your end?
No, Jessica, I don't.
Okay. All right, well, I think that will bring us to the close of today's webcast. So again, thank you everybody for taking an hour out of your day to learn about the additional plugins and the power of the HR Actions forms and plugins. And thank you, Joe, for presenting the topic for us. Hope everybody got a lot out of it. There was a question about getting a copy of the webinar slides. That is something that we can make available upon request. So follow up with Nikki if you would like a copy of that. And you should have probably received an email from her already today reminding you of today's webcast, so you can follow up with Nikki to get a copy of that. So unless there's any other questions, I will say thanks everyone and have a great afternoon.